Like a bunch of nothing.
In your own like demiurge prison.
Yeah. No, that's I don't know.
Hello and welcome to a very special episode of Mystic in the Machine. We have our first guest today, and of course, it's incredibly fitting that we have Danika XIX, also known as ComicBooKGirl 19, as the first guest of this show. Thank you so much for coming, Danika. It's a pleasure to have you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me.
For those of people in our audience that may not know who you are, would you like to just give like a brief tagline of yourself?
Yes, I am a creator and I have been making videos on the internet and beyond for over 10 years now. I started on YouTube and I still make some content for YouTube, but I also stream live on Twitch. And now I'm getting into making a documentary about Akira, the anime. So I'm all over the place.
Awesome. I wore my Akira t-shirt and well,
Your Akira t-shirt.
it's his
Yeah.
Akira t-shirt.
There we go.
It's
Yes.
his.
I'm Jake, by the way. I realize you probably don't actually know who I am. So
Hello, Jake.
The one who I stole the t-shirt from and didn't introduce.
It's okay. A large Japan is not a large European size.
Yeah.
Is what
Yes.
I discovered. So,
Yes.
I'm stretching it out for but yeah, thank you so much for coming. And one of the reasons that I was so eager to invite you on is because you're a creator that I've been watching for a very long time, like probably since like the beginning. And your show really inspired my journey on YouTube as well. And you come from this era on YouTube where there was like a lot of really creative stuff going on, especially with people making video essays and like sort of documentary style things. And it was like this weird moment in time where people were pouring a lot of creative energy into videos.
the golden era of YouTube.
Yeah, like costumes, visual effects. It was almost like, TV, like people's personal television station. But it seems as if things have evolved in a different direction, and the incentive structure is now sort of geared towards making things as quickly as possible, as disposably as possible. And I guess the first question I want to ask you is, as a creator and as a creator that's also inspired many other creators, including myself, how are you navigating this current shift in the digital environment and still remaining true to your creativity and authenticity? Yeah.
That is a great question. YouTube has changed so much over the last, like I said, 11 years that I've been on there. I started in 2012. And yeah, it was a lot different. And yes, things have changed. But I've seen this slow progression towards like away from rewarding creativity and rewarding like longer form stuff and more with more production value, and things have definitely shifted, especially post Adpocalypse, towards more things that are like just weekly kind of, or not weekly, but like daily vlog stuff that's just really fast and really down and dirty. And there's something to be said for that content too. There's a place for it for sure, but my content is not that. And so I have definitely felt the sting of the algorithm, who does not really want to promote the type of thing that I do, which is more longer format video essays that have a bit more production value. And they come out like quarterly a year. So I'm not on there all the time. And so it's definitely, I feel I get punished for that. But at the same time, I feel like it's a real blessing because it is forcing me out of the nest. And so that is why I am pursuing this documentary about Akira, because I feel like, again, I've been on YouTube for over a decade and I love what I've done. And I'm not saying that I'm going to discontinue YouTube and would never be on YouTube anymore. But I feel like for me, it's time to take the next step as a creator. And I've already made, things like the Epic History X-Men series, which is like 3-hour-long documentaries. I made those in conjunction with Vimeo. They were helping co-producing that production. And so I just feel like, yeah, it's time to go to the next level and make a full-length feature film and see where that takes me. And maybe that'll turn into something where I'm doing more documentaries and then maybe even narrative filmmaking. Or I don't know, or not. I have no idea. But I feel like this the YouTube drying up a bit, and it's not just for me too. I feel like it's for a lot of creators. Like, I think views are down for a lot of people, and while it is sad, at the same time it's very motivating to find new modalities
Exactly. Yeah.
of
Exactly.
making. Yes.
Exactly. I also think that it's a shame that the sort of incentive structure of the platform has incentivized creators away from making stuff that people actually want to watch. Like,
Mm.
I would watch an Akira documentary, I would watch an X-Men documentary, I'd watch a documentary about any of the sort of subject matter that you typically discuss and other creators like you typically discuss. But because it's not incentivized, and what is incentivized is the sort of short form, disposable, usually drama fueled kind of content, or sort of take of the week, sort of
Mhm.
take industry sort of thing.
Yes. Yes.
I think it's having somewhat of a deleterious effect on the collective unconscious in a way. I mean, you talk about the power of art a lot in your work and its meaning and how it sort of has a medicinal kind of quality to it for like the collective psyche. And I feel like early YouTube was sort of that in a way for a lot of young people
Well,
because of
I feel
the
like
amount of love that was going into what was being put out. And now that that's no longer the case, it kind of like
it's the general shift you've seen in everything, I
Mm.
believe, though. Like, I feel like it. What was the slogan? It used to be broadcast yourself.
Hmm.
And now it's like broadcast yourself asterisk see below. Because if you actually really want to do that, like, you probably need to go on like to Kick or something like that, or like a platform that would like let you say whatever you want, like, or Rumble or whatever.
yeah.
But like,
Mhm.
if you actually want to just completely freely express yourself, YouTube is really no longer the platform to
Yeah.
do that.
No. And it's so hard too. It's so frustrating as like someone who's like, my whole thing is reviews. There's a lot of review work that I do.
Mhm.
And every time I make a video, I use clips and audio and things like that from these things. And it's like, you're punished every single time. Like, they're like, oh no, you are using these clips. You shouldn't be using these clips. This is a copyright thing. And then you have to go through this process of like appealing it and be like, no, I'm using it for review. It's fair use, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
And then it takes like however long for the, whoever is the copyright holder to come back. And in the meantime, maybe I'm wrong, but like the algorithm like doesn't push your video. So it's like you put it out there because it needs you to be timely, but then you're punished because it's like got clips in it, and it's like they can't just give me a pass. It's like, bro, like I've been like, kid, you know me, like we know each other. Like, I'm not doing anything weird. Like, it's like you're guilty until proven innocent. And
Pretty
even
much.
then, sometimes they'll be like, nope, sorry. Fuck you. And then you have to peel it again. And then it's like, oh my, like what? Like
I feel like
it's a review.
if they've sent you one of those plaques, your email address for your account or whatever should just be on an automatic list of like, oh yeah, I mean, we should
Right.
send a person to investigate that, not just like the bot or whatever to automatically strike their shit down.
That would be nice, but that is not the world that we live in. And I feel
No.
like YouTube definitely, like right now, they just very much encourage the lowest common denominator content.
Yeah.
And that's, like I said, it is sad, but it is what it is. And so you just gotta, find
It's a shame though, because there's
other
so
paths
much
up the mountain.
Exactly. It's a shame because there was so much soul in a lot of like what was going on in that era of YouTube, like people really putting their soul into the work they were doing.
Yeah.
And this isn't just affecting YouTube in general, it's sort of a general soullessness that's kind of infecting the culture.
It's the destructor, as Alan says in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
Right?
It's
The destructor. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, it's like it's kind of it's like a soullessness that's infecting the culture, and this sort of drive towards the pursuit of soulless content. Like even this week alone, like with the submarine fiasco that happened, even though there was a lot of
They built their own destructor.
in a way, yeah. But even though there was a lot to be contemplated and pondered around this sort of collective tragedy, it was like, you know, the take machines were grinding and the content mills began grinding, and everyone was sort of trying to milk this thing for content because it was something that the collective unconscious was sort of clustered around. And you have these kinds of like little feeders that want to like get around the attention kind of like supply or whatever that's like around it.
I feel like it's just about like a general laziness to read though. Like people don't want to read anymore, so they'll like see a TikTok of someone explaining this thing they heard about like in the ether or on the news or like as a headline or something, and they would much rather have someone just explain it, even incorrectly, to them
well, it's
than actually read something. Like, do you feel like you have noticed that over the? I mean, comic books is I put that in the camp of reading, even though my parents would call it picture books. But like, have you noticed kind of a slump in people actually reading or like reading comics, especially maybe over the years? Or is that just an old man kind of perspective to have these days?
No, I think that there's something to it for sure. I mean, there's always the readers that are out there, but the culture itself is shifting. You know, they're just putting less emphasis on that. And so kids today, like the younger generation, are doing less reading than the generation before, you know, and it seems like that's kind of like I mean, even like my parents' generation, they probably read less than their parents' generation because they had television, you know, and then now that we have these little phones, these little computers in our pocket that you can always look at. And I mean, we are reading. It's just not like reading a long form thing, you know. It's like there is reading involved, but it's just not like kind of. I don't want to say there's no reading involved because there is, but it's a different type.
You have to use your eyes to ingest information. Well, but they also watch all the movies now, right? Like when we were reading comic books, like there wasn't all of the movies of all the different super, and they're not even the superheroes I read the comic books of. But like now, instead of like, oh yeah, you're into superheroes, like let's go to the shop and like let's get the guy to recommend you something. It's like, oh no, look, it's all on the posters. Let's just fucking take you, and that's a weekend, and that's you know, then you can go back to your mom's house. Done.
And that's why I did Epic History X-Men series, because the movies kept blowing it with like the Phoenix Saga, and it was just so upsetting to me. And the thing about the Phoenix Saga is that it's so esoteric, and it takes place over 5 years of X-Men comics, and most people are not gonna go read all of that. And I understand that, and I get it, because they're like, oh, I don't even know where to start. It's a little tough. And so that's why I made my videos where it's like, okay, like I know people have an interest in it. I know they're not going to go read it. Let me just like lay it down for them how it actually happened in the comics. And I just feel like that was such a public service for me. It's like I need to get this off my chest. Like this is actually what happens in the Phoenix Saga. And it felt really good.
When you did that video series, I was still working at a commercial cinema in London, and I got free tickets for everything that came out. So like we went and saw that at the time, and we left fuming of like how terrible it was. And then literally came and was like, oh my god, yes, ComicBooKGirl 19's done a video to vindicate the story. I knew it wasn't going to be this bad.
Yes.
Oh,
you're welcome.
Those are the days. But yeah, another, not just with reading, also with just sort of long form content in general right now. Attention spans are sort of getting shorter and shorter, and it's sad for anybody who enjoys being verbose, or I guess.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, I think that's like a symptom.
An hour-long video.
Yeah. I mean, it's a symptom of like TikTok too. Like I feel like we went from, you know, YouTube, which was like longer form, and then and YouTube is still popular, but then you have like, okay, then there's like Instagram. And so like, even though it's more like picture based or whatever, but then there's like TikTok, and it's like even, you know, these like little short clips, and it's just like things are just getting clippier and clippier. And there's a general like feeling of speeding up in society in general. Like things are just, again, with all this technology, like email and text, like you're supposed to be there at any moment to be able to get somebody's message and talk to them back. And, you know, it's just go, faster. How much can we get done? And I don't think that it's I don't think that attitude is a positive. And I think we're hitting a point where there's just like too much. Like this is like we've hit capacity at how much we can do in our day, and without things just like the quality really starting to go down. And
Definitely.
yeah,
Definitely. It's very interesting as a creator or a creative person as well, because there's an element of you that's vying for people's attention.
yeah,
And you want to, and that's also a very vulnerable thing to do, is to be like, hey, I have something to show you. And like, I guess YouTube sort of used to be a place where weird people did that, and it was like comfortable and like normal, and
Mm,
it was a big budget or like a lot of money. Like, one of the things that like inspired me about your channel was the fact that you would like make stuff. Like, you would like make things like puppets and
mm,
just like sets, and you would just like hand make things. And like the amount of soul that went into it sort of translated into the way that you were communicating with your audience, which then had an impact on the way people viewed things and viewed these sorts of things that they had once viewed as maybe consumable items as something
mm,
much deeper.
mm.
And I think it's sad that that's being kind of lost, and that it is that sort of like the sort of stuff that's like very successful is the kind of thing that is easy to produce, and that has a long-term plan, whereas with actual creativity, that's not really how it works. It's sort of, I want to do some of this and I want to do some of that, and maybe I'll pivot around to doing some of this. And that was, again, one of the things that I really enjoyed about your channel, was the fact that it was so eclectic and full of all different sorts of explorations and styles of video. And yeah, I just think it's really sad to see that that's being lost. But one thing you did mention was that you sort of feel like you're leaping the nest, or sort of outgrowing the format and pushing yourself into bigger and sort of better things. Do you feel like YouTube has been, or sort of acts like training wheels for creators of this generation? And do you think it's something that allows you to experiment, but it's not somewhere that you should necessarily stay?
Absolutely. I think that it's a really great training ground for creators. Absolutely, 100%. And I feel like I've been through like the YouTube boot camp, and now it has prepared me for, like I said, the next level of, full length feature filmmaking. And I mean, I think for some people, it's a great home for them. And, it works for some people really, really well. But I feel like for a lot of people, it is a great place to train and learn, and then go, get what you can from that experience. And then once you have gotten what you needed, then it's time to move on, for sure.
Exactly. Speaking of which, Akira, which is the meat and potatoes of this episode, you are currently working on a documentary, and you have a Kickstarter for it. Would you like to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, that has been a real journey. It ends on June 30th, but I'm not going to hit my goal, and that's okay. Like I said, there are many paths up the mountain. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the Kickstarter, retool it, simplify it, have a much lower goal, and then relaunch it in August is my plan. And yeah, and so I have found some other forms of funding for this documentary. So I have some investors involved.
Mm,
And so yeah, the documentary is still going forward, even though my original Kickstarter has not been, I guess, what they would call a success. But really, I've learned so much from doing it, and I'm very grateful for the lessons that I've learned. And so, like I said, when I relaunch it, I'm definitely gonna tighten some things up, get rid of some other things, make things a little bit simpler. And yeah, I'm very excited about it. And I'm working with an executive producer, Mark Alamarez here, and then I've got my investor, and like we're still kind of, figuring out the business end of, getting all that stuff locked in. But we've got all these really great interviews lined up with all sorts of people who've worked on Akira, and also artists and people who were collectors of Akira, like artwork, or artists who just like know so much about Katsuhiro Otomo, the creator, and like are huge fans of the work. So yeah, I'm very excited about the whole thing.
The manga is definitely on my read list. Have you read the manga as well, or?
Yes, I've read through it twice, and
Wow.
it's one of those things. Like I read a long time ago, I read it. I borrowed it from a friend of mine, and then recently, last year, I got the box set and I reread it, and it's incredible what a fast pace it is. Like it just begs to be read at a breakneck speed. And it's so cuz and it's so weird cuz there's just so much information packed in every panel, like the amount of detail work
Mm.
on the buildings and the backgrounds and just everything is mind-blowing. It's just like, "Oh my lord," but it's like it wants you to read it so fast that you don't even have time to like process it. So I
You
think
have
that
to
it's
read it twice.
exactly. I feel like it's good to like go through and just read it and then go back at your own pace and just look at the artwork and take it all in because it is just it blows my mind like the amount of work that went into especially like the backgrounds and stuff. Like as somebody who doesn't love to draw backgrounds, I'm like I cannot believe you guys drew all these buildings and these windows. It's insane. It is so
Well,
crazy.
one of the interesting things that I've always kind of thought about, the difference between reading the manga and then watching the anime is that the one of the key highlights or features, I guess, of the anime is that everybody just of the colors and like
Mhm.
the color what would you call it, color palette of Akira is like one of the most iconic parts about it. But manga is obviously like a black and white format, and so do you kind of do you does your brain kind of after seeing the film just like color the manga as you're reading it, or do you just take it in its black and white form? Does it take anything away from kind of the vibe or the story, or
Yeah,
anything like that?
that's a really great question. I've never really thought about it until you just asked me. And for
Well done, you.
I've never like I don't add colors. Like it stands on its own. I mean, even though I
Mm,
love color,
mm,
it totally stands on its own as a black and white piece. You know, it's
mm,
just like I said, the artwork is so phenomenal. And I love mangas. I read a lot of mangas. So I'm used to like reading, I don't have a problem with reading things that aren't colored and they're just in black and white. And I mean, I think in that instance, it's actually like really interesting what you can do with just
mm.
tones. It's just like
Yeah.
wow, like it's the zip tone stuff too that they do in particular is just like whoa, really cool. And I don't think it takes anything away from it. I think it makes it a little like edgier and like
Mm.
grittier,
Mhm.
which really works for the story.
Akira is one of the first. Oh, sorry. Go
Oh
ahead.
no, go ahead. That was it.
I was just gonna say Akira is one of the first animes I ever saw, and I saw it while I was like way too young to be watching anything like that. And it's because I
Yeah.
have two older brothers, so I saw a lot of things that I shouldn't have seen. But when I don't remember much of my first impression of it, other than being super terrified by Tetsuo's transformation scene, which like
Mhm.
traumatized me and like scarred me in my young brain when I saw it. But then when I revisited it as an adult, it sort of opened up all of these like new dimensions that I hadn't noticed before. There's like metaphysical aspects of it that I didn't realize were there. The character of Tetsuo as well, just like super tragic and endlessly fascinating. Is Tetsuo's character different in the manga? Because I've not read the manga. Are there differences between movie Tetsuo and manga Tetsuo?
There are definitely differences between the manga Tetsuo and yes, and the anime Tetsuo. But I would say like their core being though is still the same. Like they're not radically different. There's just more in the manga. Like you
Mm.
just get so much more of him. And I mean, for instance, one of the things that's like a big difference is in the manga series, he ends up taking over the clown gang and becomes like the king of the clowns and and just is like we need capsules, like we need these pills, like keep it going. It becomes this crazy drug pusher. And I mean, and like he's like got a cool guy jacket with like fur on the collar and like I don't know, it's a whole thing. And
Oh, you nailed the jacket in your Kickstarter trailer.
Oh
by the
yeah,
way,
oh
on your
yeah,
YouTube
Oh,
channel.
yes.
It was so good. That was great.
Thank you so much. That's an eBay banger that I picked up. It's just like 80s red leather jacket, and that one worked out really, really well.
I was waiting for you to turn around and it be like anime accurate with the pill on the back and everything.
Mhm. Yeah, I'm actually gonna get the pill patch and put that in there and do that as well eventually. I haven't done that
Nice.
yet, but it's on my list of things to do. But even in the ending, like Tetsuo, I mean, he also has more questions. He's like a little more like he starts like harder and then he gets a little bit softer and it's like, oh, what? And then, but I think the endings are very similar with like how like he kind of transcends at the end and like learns to go beyond his physical form.
Is the film like all of the manga condensed, or is the film just the first manga? Because whenever I look at the manga in the shops, it's these like three or four huge volumes, and you just like, I mean, that's a film in itself, surely. Or maybe the breakneck speed in which you read it makes it kind of zip through, and actually the whole 3 issues is the one film. I'm not sure.
Well, there's 6 volumes of the manga.
6,
and I believe like the movie really only deals with what's in the first 2 mangas, because at the time when they were creating the movie, the mangas hadn't even been finished yet. And so it wasn't until years later that the mangas were completed. And so hence you have a little bit of a different ending. And it's interesting because in the manga series, or in the movie, there's no Akira, I mean, there is, but he's like in these jars and he's been vivisected. But in the mangas, like there is a little boy. Akira is like, he's there. And like, he's a big part of the story. And so there are these big differences. And it's funny too, because like the movie kind of ends, where you have the big explosion in Neo Tokyo, the second like explosion. But in the manga series, you have the big explosion, but then it keeps going. And then you see what happens to society after this massive explosion and how the city is wrecked. And there's these 2 different camps of people who like take in the refugees and the people who've survived. And then they have a rumble. And it's like, oh, it gets like so much crazier. And it's totally worth reading the manga series. I highly recommend it.
I definitely have to.
Yeah.
It actually goes beyond the climax. It's sort of like you see people make that critique all the time of like, I want to see after Watchmen and after V for Vendetta of like what happens after the big fucking thing, the world-changing event.
Yes.
You don't get to see the next bit, but Akira actually explores that. So I'm definitely going to read the manga now.
Yeah. One thing I'm curious about your take on is because I rewatched it recently and was struck by just how like schizo it is, and like how there's like this government plot with like experimenting on kids and like all these like weird abilities, and like there's like a weird like metaphysical plot underneath it. There are all these different cults springing up. There's like this cyberpunk kind of dystopian hyper consumerist culture. And what I wanted to ask is like in which ways do you think Akira is kind of relevant to the current moment? I feel like things have gotten quite schizo and science fiction-y culturally right now. I mean, every time you switch on the news, they're talking about like aliens and like war and like diseases and all kinds of crazy shit. It feels like we're living in a science fiction kind of cyberpunk schizo dystopia currently. And yeah, I wonder what parallels you see between Akira and like the current climate / zeitgeist.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's really interesting. In the 80s, like the cyberpunk dystopian fantasy like became a big thing. You had Blade Runner, you have Akira, you have Neuromancer. I mean, there's all these things, and it's like weird like being a fan of those things and being like, oh, it'd be cool to like be in that world. And then now we're like going into that world. I'm like, never mind. I don't want to live in that world. That world sucks. And
we don't even have cool outfits. Like all we have is like Twitter's like shitty interface, and like it's just sad.
I feel like my whole life it's been like I was a young teenager and like, I wish they made comic book movies, and then they did, and you're like, oh, not like that. And then you're like, oh, I wish I lived in Blade Runner. Oh wait, no, not like that. Like
totally, it's like the monkey's paw, like for real. And yeah, we are headed, I mean, with all this, the technology and with AI and everything like that, like we are heading into just like these unknown waters, like this Black Mirror shit that's like, I don't know what's gonna happen. It seems, I mean, even like things like Ghost in the Shell too, where it's like you have all these like cyborgs and people who are like being plugged in. And it's like, oh, I don't want to plug, you know, but I feel like in our lifetime, we're gonna see people with
Oh
plugs
yeah. Oh
in
yeah.
their
Oh yeah.
brains. And
Oh
it's
my god.
like,
Oh my god. You have to join my Benny Gesserit order that I'm trying to start. I'm trying to begin the seeds of like the Butlerian jihad. I feel
yes.
like we're
I'm-
both Aquariuses, so it makes
Uh-huh.
sense. And we should
Yes.
just like we should start it. Like we need to make it happen.
I mean, absolutely. I think about that all the time. And I think it's like there's this Dune quote that like especially really resonates with right now, where Frank Herbert wrote, "Once men turned their thinking over to machines in the hopes that this would set them free, but that only permitted other men with machines to enslave them." And I'm just like, "Yep, Frank
Mhm.
saw it.
He
Like
did. He
that's
did.
like
He
that's
did.
where we're going. That's where
He
this is
did.
what's happening right now."
Yeah.
Like
It even like aeonically it kind of matches up because it feels like the Butlerian jihad happened in the Age of Aquarius.
mhm.
Like and then like the post Age of Aquarius is like the Dune plot. And like I feel like
Yeah.
Frank was sending us a message. That's like my schizo theory. He's
Yes.
like trying to awaken our inner Benny Gesserits right now when it's like needed the most.
Well, it's funny you mentioned
Absolutely.
like that Dune quote. I was going to ask, as a filmmaker, are you looking at AI in any kind of hopeful way that it could actually kind of benefit your process in any
Mhm.
meaningful way, or are you seeing it as like the death of everything sacred that you love and hold dear?
I mean, it's sublime. It's both of those things. Like
Mhm.
it's a tool. Like AI is a tool, and it can be used in ways that are very helpful. It can also be
Mhm.
used in ways that are very detrimental to society.
Mhm.
And the power that, I mean, it's like that the potential power of this force is really, it's hard to wrap my mind around it and just see exactly how weird it's going to get. But for me personally, I have played with Chat GPT and it has been really helpful because I'm not a writer. Like, I don't love to sit down and write. I can do it. It's not something that I think of as an, like, I'm not like, I'm a writer, I'm an artist with words. That's not me. I'm a visual, like, let me paint something, let me draw something, let me say something, but let me perform it. And so it's been really helpful for me, like, say I need to write a press release, and it's like, "Chat GPT, write me a press release," and it does such a good job, and I'm like, "Oh, thank you. I did not wanna do this." Like, so it can be very useful in that, but also you have to be very careful too, because my executive producer is a big fan of Chat GPT, and he's like, It'll just write your movie for you," and I'm like, "No, it won't, okay?" Like, I,
No.
I love you, but like it can be helpful in that, you know, you can get a paragraph started, because sometimes I just sit and I stare at a blank page and I don't know where to start. And so
Yeah.
I'm a better editor than I am a writer, in that if I see a paragraph, I know what I don't like and I know how to fix it. And so it is good to kind of give me a base of things, but you have to be wary because not everything ChatGPT says is correct. So if you don't know like the inside, like inside and out what you're doing, like you can't trust it because it
Mm.
will give you false information.
Mhm,
And
mhm,
so
mhm.
it really does, like, it's something where it's helpful and it's a great tool and it can get me started with some things. But do I see it being like, oh, it's going to take over everybody's, they're just going to write novels and there's not going to be novelists anymore? No, I
Mm.
don't think that a computer can take away that from humans.
Mm.
And it's
But
interesting. I have a friend, Rake, and he does a lot of he does drawings, and he started using AI because a lot of artists are like really upset about it. And I totally understand. As an artist myself, I understand the upset, and people will lose some jobs over this for sure. But he's using it in a way that's like, okay, so he'll go on Midjourney, say, I need a hot girl in a bathing suit on a beach in a thing, and then, you know, it'll spit out an image. But again, the image isn't totally right. Some of the anatomy's wrong, some of the perspectives are wrong, some of the things just don't look very good. But he'll use it as a base and then go in and correct it and make it like 100 times better. But
Yeah.
that's like
yeah,
speeding
yeah.
up his workflow because now he's got something to work off of, so he doesn't have to start from scratch. And it's like, wow, that's so smart. Like, that's such a great way as an artist to use this tool and help it to speed up your workflow rather than just being upset about it and saying it's going to take my job and then laying down and giving up.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Well, it's also just like, I think there's practical elements to it as well. Like even me as a music artist, I wouldn't be able to commission a YouTuber to like make me a music video because
Yeah.
the economy does not serve for that. Like I'm not going to make enough money on a music video for it to make sense or make like, but the artistry and the point of it is kind of the fun of it, right? But still within that, needing other people's skills and cooperation, it's either got to be led from a pure passion of like, I fucking love what you do. Oh my fucking god, I love what you do. Let's definitely like just fuck it. But that is like fucking
Rare,
lightning in a
yeah.
fucking bottle when you find
It's like even
connections like that.
Jodorowsky couldn't with Dune, like when he tried to assemble his army
well,
of spiritual
he almost
warriors.
got there. He was like,
He's
you know,
nearly very
a few
close.
schmeckles away from making his dream happen. But
Yeah.
like, but fucking like, what my point was, like, you know, I couldn't commission them because it just economically doesn't make sense. But in the same way, they're not gonna ask me to write a piece of music for their fucking YouTube video. They'll go to a library and grab something because it's way more convenient and like manageable and whatever, all the other shit. Like
my worry isn't necessarily that it's going to take over or this. It's more so like the soulfulness that I've been talking about and how so much is geared towards creating disposable, easy to produce, easy to repeat formats that, you know, are able to be salient in the attention economy, blah blah blah. And you know, there's a lack of soulfulness in a lot of what we're seeing produced out of this sort of format. It's produced with like an agenda rather than just for the sake of like the joy of the process. It's kind of like the Faustian bargain. Like the whole kind of moral of the story of Faust was that he needed to learn to enjoy the process instead of trying to cheat by, you know, making a deal with the devil or this like genie that's kind of promising to do the hard work for you type of thing. And yeah, I think that, like you said, there are a lot of amazing things that this technology can do, but I also feel like it can pose an almost Faustian bargain for artists in terms of surrendering elements of their agency and their creative intention to convenience, ease, and to sort of fit these predisposed, pre kind of determined boxes that guarantee success in the attention economy type of
I
thing.
think it's being marketed that way. But just like you said, Danica, like it's taking like you're already creatively minded, but as you said, you're self-confessed not a writer. So but you could get going with something. It then becomes like an editing and almost like a sculpting process, less than a completely fresh out of the box. And that's a different type of creativity. Do you know what I mean? And it's not trying to justify and like, oh, you know, it's actually not like creating. He's doing this like thing, and you're like, you know, it's like genuinely like a different type of creativity. So
even like prompt programming is like,
no, that's where I'm not trying to take
no,
it.
but it is almost. There is a kind of poeticness to prompt poetry because poetry is kind of a distillation of meaning, and you have to do that in order to get the thing to produce something interesting or whatever. But I don't know. Back to the zeitgeist and Akira. Before we get to, you say, yeah, you go.
Okay, so I was thinking about like, okay, so I'm a big tarot person, tarotologist.
Yeah, we are too.
And I think in these times a lot about the tower. And Akira is also about the tower, which is like crisis and rebirth. And you have this ostentatious structure that has lost its soulfulness. And then it is struck by chaos, falls apart, and there is a rebirth cycle from that, though. It's like it seems like this terrible moment. And at the time it can be painful, but out of that pain will grow all of this creativity. And that's the message, you know, in my opinion, of Akira as well. You see this huge city, you know, but it's again, like you see also the bottom of this city of these kids who have nothing, who just like are willing to throw their lives away because they have no meaning. And by the end of it, you know, it gets exploded. It's like, okay, like we're starting over. Like, and I mean, even like Tetsuo is like, he starts over as a godlike metaphysical entity now. I mean, so he's reborn. And I feel like right now society is in a tower moment because things are falling apart. And I just look around all the time, and things that used to be so simple and easy, and then now it's like, why is this hard? Why do people not know how to do this anymore? Why is this worker like telling me they have no idea? It's like, isn't this your job? Like, I don't understand. And I feel like we're personally going through like a collapse of society. And I mean, society, though, like everything, it's a cycle. I mean, you can only become so civilized before it falls apart again. And I mean, there's all of these symptoms that you see in all of these civilizations. And if you look at like what was going on in Rome right before Rome fell, it's like, well, a lot of the stuff that they were like experiencing, we're experiencing right now. And what do you know? Like here we are. So
Definitely.
we're heading into really interesting times.
Very interesting times. Very interesting times
The
indeed.
downfall of society did look a lot cooler in Akira.
Yeah.
A little bit.
Yeah.
If someone gets like reborn as a god consciousness and that comes out of it, then I guess that's okay. And then it was worth it. Like for Samsara to like start all over again.
Yeah.
What if it is actually Elon Musk though? He just becomes the main character.
The main character of Earth.
The main character of Earth. I mean, personally, like me watching all of this, and of course, like there's a part of me that's really, frightened of everything that's happening. And so to kind of deal with it, like I've recently joined a Shaolin Temple, and that's why I've shaved my head. And I'm just like learning like meditation, Qigong. I'm learning like the Bufa and like the 18 movements. And I mean, I have a lot of work to do, mind you, because my body's very, very stiff. But I'm just like, I just have to go somewhere like, and I need a safe space for like me to just go and distract myself from like everything falling apart. And like, because the only thing that I can do is work on myself. And so if I can work on my own patience, and like this is like my Bene Gesserit training too. Like I think of this as like my Bene Gesserit training.
You're actually serious. You're not like a dilettante Bene Gesserit like me, who's like, I'm doing my 15 minutes of headspace. Like she's joined a fucking Shaolin Temple. Like Jesus Christ. Okay.
Well,
I gotta step it up.
It's been a long time coming,
Oh my gosh. That's so cool though. Are you actually an Aquarius?
Yes.
Okay, so that's like super air sign of you to like do like a half monastic life and like shave your head. Like yes, sister. You're doing it. You're doing it for us. You're doing it for all of us. But that's so amazing. And I definitely agree that now is the time to take that inward journey. I feel like there's so much currently that threatens that soulfulness. Like the destructor, like Jake mentioned, from Jerusalem. And I feel like the antidote is the human soul and like a reassertion of the sovereignty of the human soul. And I think that art as well is a massive way of putting that imprint out into the world and, creation. And one last thing about Akira, I wanted to talk a little bit about the metaphysical dimension of it, which is something that I've kind of struggled to tease apart for many years, and I've sort of been like, what does this mean, blah blah blah. But yeah, I one parallel that I did notice was the idea of the birth of consciousness beginning with tragedy and like trauma. It kind of reminded me of like, the biblical story of like Adam and Eve, for instance, and how it sort of represents the birth of consciousness and how it began with a fall, like a transgression of some sort. And at the end of Akira, after this like acute period of tragedy and pain, Tetsuya basically becomes a god. He becomes a new form of consciousness. And I wonder what you think of the metaphysical dimension of Akira and what you took from it.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we're all chewing on it, I feel like forever. And that's what makes it so great, is something that you can like think about for a really long time. And studying Taoism, in the Tao, like I want to do more kind of deeper studies into Taoism, because it's like that's what I feel like he's tapping into, is the Tao, like the source of nothingness. He is getting to like the eternal darkness at the center of everything. And but I mean, I also know that's more of Taoism is more of a Chinese thing. So like, and this is a very Japanese thing. So I feel like I may need to do some more research into Shintoism as well, which Shintoism is like everything has a soul. But I'm not sure like what they're like, because they talk a lot about like how it's like tapping into this flow, like they're very mysterious way they talk about it, but it's like he's tapping into this flow of like universal energy is like what's happening.
I think it's
And
all the same thing culturally though, because
yeah,
I'm not Nigerian, and in Yoruba culture we have a thing called like the ori, or the head, and it's this sort of, I guess, spiritual aspect that leads you through life, but it's not attached to your ego. It's like your holy guardian angel, or in the Western sort of canon, like the logos. And I feel like it kind of appears in every culture, and like the Tao has many different faces and like representations like in all of humanity. I think it's like sort of a universal concept. It's like what Carl Jung even called like the self. I think it's like, I think that the fact that you're seeing it present in the Japanese like Akira makes a lot of sense, because I feel like it's universal, and it's in everything in that sense.
Yes, and the Japanese have such a respect for life. And that's one of the things that I really love about their culture, is just like their respect for life. And I see that reflected in Akira.
Massively.
Have you ever sorry. Have you ever visited Japan? Have you ever been out there?
I went this year for the
wow.
first time, and it was everything I wanted and more.
Oh my God.
Amazing.
It lives up to the hype, like 100%. And
my God.
and I was there for business and pleasure. I was making contacts for the documentary and talking to people out there about it, and trying to find interviews and things like that, and talking to other producers. And then I was there just to experience the city, and I stayed in Tokyo for most of the time. I did one day in Hakone, which is like a hot springs area where Evangelion is set.
Yes.
And it was great. It was so good, and I just was like, I could live here. Like, I don't know. It would be lonely. It could be lonely, because definitely, like, the Japanese don't really, most of them are just like, hey, gaijin, that's cool. They're not rude to you or anything, but they're definitely not like coming up to talk to you either. There's not like, there is kind of a little bit of a, okay, you're over there, like I'm over here. But that's not everyone. I mean, even like I had great experiences with shopkeepers, but I have great experiences with shopkeepers my whole life. Like some of my best interactions with humans, and my favorite interactions with humans, is when I go in a store and I talk to somebody who's working there, and I don't know, like I always have a great time with these people. And I know they're trying to sell me something, I get it, but I also know, as somebody who's worked in a shop, that it can be pretty boring just standing around in the shop all day. And so I bring to them some fun and some color, and I'm like playfulness to their kind of like, okay, I'm at work day, and they really respond to that and are just like, oh wow, like it's good to talk to another human, And
oh my God. Speaking of Evangelion, though, I'm so glad that you brought it up. I mean, as much as I love Akira, I really wish that you would do. I'll do it. If you don't fucking do it, I'll fucking do it. But I recently watched it. And I'm the type of person that is always,
after years of begging,
I talk shit on anime. I'm like, oh my God, that's some fucking nerd. Like, I'm a nerd, but like not that deeply. Like, I'm not gonna like dig into those trenches or whatever.
It's a whole thing.
He convinced me, because I think it was just after lockdown or whatever, and it was the perfect time. I was like going through my Saturn return and everything.
Yes.
So it was like it was the perfect time, because I was like already like his influences were already like all over my brain. And like we watched it, and it completely fucking blew my mind, changed my life, like turned my brain upside down. It's like the most alchemical piece of art, one of the most alchemical pieces of art that I've ever encountered. It definitely had this sort of catalytic effect on my soul. It was an expression of soul in like the truest sense.
Yes.
And also it was even though obviously you have the surface level kind of emotional arc, there's some deep fucking esotericism in Evangelion, like massively, like things about the birth of consciousness, the destiny of consciousness, Gnostic ideas, like Jungian ideas, that human instrumentality, the concept of which really struck me and also kind of haunted me, because I feel like we're currently in a state where things are becoming more fragmented. People are sort of splitting off into tribes. People are becoming more atomized and insular. But then there's this deep desire for unity. But that desire for unity is kind of manifesting itself in very perverse ways, i.e., identity cults, political cults,
it's only out of fear.
fandom cults,
It's only out of
technological
fear.
kind of merging. All of this sort of thing, ways that we're trying to kind of reconnect are making us more fragmented and alone. And I felt like human instrumentality was this sort of nihilistic resignation, like, let us return to the primordial ooze. Like, you know, this world is so, it's so, like, you know, painful, and it's so fragmented, and it's so divided that we might as well just become primordial ooze again, because, you know, why the fuck not? It's better than living these fragmented, meaningless lives. And I feel like that ethos is that nihilism is very much present in our culture. It seems as if everybody wants human instrumentality. And like, you're seeing it with these sorts of post-secular cults that are popping up. Like, you have transhumanists who are like, the singularity is coming and we're all going to become one consciousness. Or you have people who think they're going to reshape the world through their ideology and their political affiliation. Everybody wants to kind of reach apocalypse, but everyone has their vision for how that's going to occur. And I wonder what you think about all of this schizo ramblings.
Well, something you said just struck me as the transhumanists, and, you know, like, people wanting to live forever and digitize their soul, and, you know, and then everyone downloads their consciousness into this thing. And I just, like, feel like whenever I hear stuff like that, I'm just like, why would you want to trap your consciousness on, like, the lowest level of reality? Like, that's like, it's like trapping yourself in hell. Like, you know, like, I'm like, that's a bad idea.
You're becoming the demiurge of your own, like, fragmented, like, universe space. It's like very Gnostic in the sense that it is like a fall, a further descent into matter. And if, like, the allegory of, like, Eden is the idea that we were once in this sort of unified consciousness and then we fell into matter, wouldn't merging with technology be a further descent into matter?
Yeah. In my opinion, yes. But at the same time, it's like, you have to think, like, there are many paths up the mountain. Maybe there's a path down the mountain. Maybe you can go so far down that you come back up again. You know, I don't know how that would work exactly with trapping your soul in a digitized space, but you know, maybe it's there. I don't know. I haven't been to the digitized space, so and I don't want to go to the digitized
No, I don't
space.
want to go either.
I'm gonna be that grandma in the future that's like, I don't want any plugs in my brain, you know, and like, and then like the kids are gonna be like, whatever, grandma, like,
Me too. No, I've already got my robophobia, like, credentials up massively. I'm gonna be that, like, robophobic grandma that's like, no, you can't bring your robot boyfriend to Thanksgiving. It's not happening.
You can't bring your robot boyfriend. That's so funny. But, you know, something I have to remind myself of, because we are in such weird times right now, and it can be very scary, is that, you know, the pendulum always swings back. And so, you know, you're seeing this push towards, like you said, shorter and shorter content with, like, less and less soulful stuff. And then you're seeing, you know, all this AI stuff coming out, and like, oh, just computers are making stuff, blah, blah, blah. Everyone's so hype on it because it's new. But eventually that pendulum is going to swing back, and like, there will be some sort of rebirth somewhere, some new platform, some new thing where, like, all of this creativity is going to pour out. And then there'll be a real backlash against things made by computers, and people are going to want to see things made, like singular objects made by a person or people. Made by human hands. So it's like, you just have to kind of remember that. I mean, it may take longer than you want it to, but it'll definitely come back around at some point.
The iPad babies are going to revolt. That's what's going to happen. And they're going to join the Butlerian jihad. In fact, I think the iPad babies are going to spearhead it. Like,
the iPad babies.
I think you're wrong. I think you're pinning your hopes on the wrong generation. I think the iPad babies are going to be so engrossed in this digital world that they're not even aware of what life could be.
No,
what
dude,
existence would be
consciousness
outside
always
of the
finds a
digital world.
way. They might be trapped in this like little
You should be
demiurgic
pinning your hopes
prison,
on our generation.
but there's gonna be like a
We're the
Neo.
last ones to have any kind of analog childhood.
There'll be like a Neo that in the
The
iPad
Neo.
baby generation that like the spark of consciousness, like the light of Sophia, will like switch on in his head,
Mhm.
and then he'll like save them all or whatever. Like it always finds a way. Like somehow it always does. So I'm not too worried about them.
Well, it's interesting too at every like the start of every new astrological era, there is like ascended masters that kind of like come with that. And so, the last like the age of Pisces, we had Jesus, and Jesus was a fish, and I think Buddha too. I think Buddha and Jesus are like the two fish of the Piscean era.
Piscean age, yeah.
One of them wanted you to fill your heart with love, and the other one wanted you to empty your mind. And I think that if you do those two things, like, you are going to be popping. Like, it's like the best thing you could do for yourself.
Very
And
true.
so it'll be interesting to see who rises and kind of sets the tone spiritually for the Age of Aquarius.
Yeah, I've been reading Jung's Ion recently, and he talks about this specifically. I highly recommend it, like especially if you're an Aquarius, because we have one job.
Well, when did
we've been given one job that
when
and
did the Age of Aquarius start?
Well,
wasn't it in the 60s? Isn't that why they sang that song?
I think it was like, didn't it start like it did start during that period, or it was like the cusp of it during that period, and now we're like really in it.
There's no firm date for this sort of thing. It's just like we're at the start of it.
Yeah.
And it started,
like
I believe this century. I mean, I feel like the invention of like electricity, I mean, that's very Aquarian.
Massively.
And then the cars, and now the vaping, and like all that, and the AI. It's just like, we're in it now.
And the aliens as well. I was like, when Marco Rubio was like sweating on the news, I was like, oh shit, like we have firmly entered the Age of Aquarius now. Like, Jesus.
Yeah, there's aliens.
Yeah.
We're here.
If it goes all the way back to there, then I would pose that there has already been the thought wizard of the Aquarius age, the Aquarian age, and that was Aleister Crowley.
Well, I think he kind of that's a whole podcast, dude. Then we have to get into Moonchild, and we have to get into Jack Parsons, and like that's a whole
Just
show.
saying.
But basically, in Ion, Jung sort of talks about how the heroes of the Aquarian age are not like the heroes of old. The heroes of this age are the ones who are able to reconcile opposites.
Yes.
And that's sort of the goal of the Aquarian age. Number one, the realization of evil, which means humanity has to kind of like realize that evil isn't something that's outside of it, that it comes from within. And that's going to be really difficult because
100.
Yeah. But like Aquarius, it's our job to like sort of, integrate that in ourselves so that we can also help awaken others to it. And secondly, it's about the reconciliation of opposites. And it made me think specifically about Jon Snow, who is kind of an Aquarian hero because he contains opposites. He's highborn, but he's also a bastard. He was at the wall, but he was hanging out with the wildlings. He didn't necessarily conquer the enemy. He went and became the enemy, enveloped the enemy, and then attempted to reconcile those factions in order to serve a higher purpose. The heroes of old were all about vanquishing enemies, stabbing people, being your tribe winning, very sort of tribal kind of conscious. Whereas the Aquarian type of hero is a different kind of hero, one that often appears weak to our typical like kind of monkey brained consciousness. And that's kind of what Jung outlines as the goal of those who want to rise to the occasion in the Age of Aquarius. But it's not easy work because it requires differentiating yourself from the collective unconscious, which is lonely as fuck.
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, as the Bene Gesserit say, it's lonely being a human. It's just like it sucks.
It sucks, but that's kind of what it's like. I've been reading a lot of Jung recently and like kind of making a lot of content based on it, and like it's comforting and life affirming because of the sort of, I guess, framework it gives you, but at the same time it's kind of like you're really on your own on this. Like you gotta, it's like a sort of self-reliance that you see a lot more in Eastern philosophy than you do in Western philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot more of a reliance psychologically on this concept of like a god figure or like a
Yes.
psychological parental figure, whereas in the East they're like there's this vibe thing called the Tao, and like it doesn't necessarily really care about you, but it flows through all things, and like
Yes.
if you are on that course, then things will be good for you. If you're not, then it's going to be shit for you. There's sort of
Mm-hmm.
a personal responsibility aspect that I feel like is missing in
Yeah.
Western spirituality.
That means we've got to just vibe with the transhumanism and like go with it, because otherwise we're kicking against the Tao.
No, I
of,
think
like,
that's kicking
the
against the
world.
Tao. I
Yeah.
think that not going with that is staying on course with the Tao, but that's the whole other thing. But what I'm saying is like, yeah, this sort of responsibility for having a soul is something that I think is lacking in our current culture, and I feel
Mm.
like it's a heavy responsibility, which is why people would rather disappear into a mass or into an identity or into an
Yeah.
ideology or whatever, because having a soul is this like really big responsibility. And like, yeah, I feel like that's what people are sort of afraid to rise to the occasion of. And I wonder what you think about that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing about like the Age of Aquarius also is like Aquarians are individuals. So I mean, that goes exactly with what you were saying. It's like you have to like realize your own individuality. And a lot of people, I mean, that takes work. It's really hard to like get in there, and it's not cute and pleasant because, like you were saying again, it's like you have to integrate with your shadow. You have to realize that the evil is not external, the evil is within you. Your greatest enemy is yourself. Like, how are you defeating yourself in these small ways that you're not even conscious of? And having to face your shadow is terrifying. And so I think that, you're right. Like, people are instead of wanting to have to do that, they just want to dissolve into these like other identities that are given to them because it's easy and there's no thinking, and you're just like, you're told what to think, you're told what to say, you're given the taglines, you're told who to vote for or who to hate. And people are just so overburdened with, I think, with information and with life and with taxes and working and paying your rent and having children and dealing with all the social media and all the information that's being like pushed at you all the time. People are just, I think, really tired and checking out, and that's why they're really seeking these sort of things, whether, like you're saying, whether it's a political group or whether it's a whatever. I mean, spirituality is definitely on the decline. At least I don't want to say spirituality is on the decline, but religion is on the decline. At least Christianity, from my viewpoint. I mean, church attendance has like been going down my whole life, and I understand why. And that's something too that's interesting about the Eastern thing, is like, we're not a religion. Like Buddhism is like, you can worship whoever you want. Like, we're a philosophy. We do have gods. If you want to worship them, you can. But Buddha is not a god. So like, don't worship him, like, and I really like that, that Eastern kind of thing. But at the same time, I also like, I grew up in the church. I love Christ,
Same.
Jesus lives in my heart. Like, I have no problems with him. He's great.
Same.
Again, like, people have taken his messaging and taken, his stuff and done weird, gross things with them. And that's not on him. So, like, that's
Definitely.
but again, like, as that, like I said, like, people, I think there's just like more atheism than ever before. And I feel like, again, this pendulum is going to swing back. Like, people are going to like be like,
I see it
wow,
already.
it's like, this is so hollow. Like, I mean, maybe some people find joy in it. Some people genuinely love it and it really works for them. And I have no problem with atheism or atheists. But I just feel like a lot of them that I've met don't seem very happy or fulfilled, and seem like there's just a lot of anger there. And not everyone, not all of them, but some of them, like many of them. But that's also with like, even like with Christians too, or with it's like everybody. It's like,
yeah, I mean, I see it already. I feel like we're already entering a kind of post-secular age, in the sense that these new god forms are rising all over the culture. Even people who are sort of avowed atheists in the tech world, for instance, believe that they're giving birth to a godhead with artificial intelligence. And they speak about it in incredibly religious terminology. Even with the whole UFO phenomenon going on right now, Carl Jung wrote like a whole treatise on UFOs and how they sort of represent the God image of the Aquarian age, and that it's a search for numinosity in the skies, and that in this sort of secular age of reason, the God image within will still find a way to be born. And the fact of the matter is, God isn't dead. God has just sort of discarded our image, and now we have to look for him again somewhere.
Yeah.
And we are. And I feel like the search for meaning that you're talking about in like identities and all of this stuff, it's people's search for this numinosity, this soul image in places that are kind of misguided in that sense, because they're cut off from that true transcendence, that sort of great Tao that we're talking about.
Yes.
And that's, I feel like, why there's this sort of nihilism in the technological utopianism that's currently being pushed right now, because it's this idea that, well, there's nothing else, and if I have to become the demiurge of my own universe in order for to imbue life with meaning, because this universe is meaningless and empty, type of thing. And it's just like this, like,
I definitely get like people making fake gods out of AI and even like aliens and all sorts of stuff in the modern era, and sort of building informal churches.
I mean, that fucking Klaus Schwab guy is literally made an AI rewrite the Bible and said that it was the more perfect religious text because it was written by a higher intelligence. Like, we are literally in a post-secular age right now. Like, anime shit is happening in real life, basically.
But I would say, as someone that grew up in a secular atheist house and is like an atheist person as well, I think everyone's on the search, and most people, I don't even think, actually, I'll rephrase that. Most people are not on the search for meaning. Most people are just fucking surviving. And they just like that there are less rules to govern how they try and survive. And there are some people that will still seek answers. And I see myself as a seeker, as someone that's just like naturally quite interested in philosophy and these sort of mind games that you can
He's
play
a Sagittarius.
He's a sort of, and so I don't think it's necessarily always has to be wrapped up in like an organized fashion. I feel like the pursuit for meaning is like a way bigger thing than, I mean, they're all trying to talk about the same exact thing and give you that exact thing, but I don't think any of them can just tell you in a nice wrapped up sentence or paragraph, this is what it's about, because you have to read the whole thing and digest it, and it's your personal relationship with the text and all sorts of other stuff that kind of gets in the way. And I feel like there's all sorts of ways of being able to be in contact with that thing that are not also reading. But that's a different podcast in itself, maybe. But
I don't know how deep you guys are into the Kabbalah at all. But on the Tree of Life, there is a sphere below Keter, but above Tifereth. And it's a sphere that's there, but it's not there. Like, it's recognized, but it's not, and it has a name, but it's also recognized as being false. Like, and it's called Da'at. And it is the sphere of knowledge. And when you're going up spiritually, the Tree of Life, and you're going through all these different spheres, this is the one that you would hit right before you go to the supernal triad at the top, where you kind of like transform, or you transcend form, and you go into just like pure like spiritual energy. And the thing about like this, like, I just think about Da'at all the time as like the internet. It's there, but it's not there. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's there, but it's not there. It's like it lives in this other weird zone, but we interface with it every day, but it's not a physical place. It's like, it's this like, it's the cloud. What is that? And the thing that's interesting about Da'at is when you're taking the leap over the abyss, and this is very Crowley, this is like Thelema, you have to like, go through the abyss and come out on the other side. But there's a demon called Koranzan, and this is like the demon of dispersion, and he's just gonna fuck your shit up, like, and like, if you can't let go of like words and like concepts and like, you know what I'm saying, like, you're gonna, like, he's just gonna put you around in circles and keep you there, and you're just going to be like, I don't know, because he uses like knowledge, logic, reason, things like that, but you have to transcend those things. And like, I just feel like these AI gods that people are, scientists or whoever is trying to give birth to, it's like you're just creating Corazon. Like this is gonna be the demon,
Yep,
But
yep,
but you have to face the demon. The thing is, the demon's also sacred, and like
yeah.
he's the last step. Like he's like the final boss, not the
Mm.
final boss, but he's like a boss, a big boss before you go
Mhm.
to the higher levels.
Mhm.
And so I don't know. That's an interesting. I think about that sometimes. I don't know. It's a little weird.
It's true. I think that's a really great like way of illustrating it. And I think the tree of life, especially right now, is like an archetype or an image that's like so important because
Mm,
there's this almost desire to transcend like Malkuth and
mhm,
enter into the sort of higher, more unified realms of consciousness. And it feels like
mhm.
all these different factions of society have their ideas for how to do that.
Yes.
Some of which are destructive, some of which are positive. Like in our Patreon the other day, someone compared it to the scene from Indiana Jones, and when they go to find the Holy Grail, and there's all the shiny, like fancy cups, and they like drink
Yes.
out of them and ignore the simple cup. That kind of feels like what's going on right now in terms of ascension, quote unquote. It seems like there are all these different ascension philosophies,
Yes.
ways that the culture is presenting that you can achieve spiritual apotheosis through imbibing this ideology, following this thought leader, plugging into this machine or whatever. Everything is sort of presenting us with the prize of ascending up the tree of life. And
Mhm,
that's why I think that the tree of life specifically is such an important cosmological image or tool for the current moment. And also
mhm,
the nodes on it kind of show you where certain things may be malfunctioning too in the collective psyche. I feel like the use of it in Evangelion was also kind of genius in that way as well, since what the evil scientists were doing in that was a similar sort of ascension
Mm.
mhm.
process, but like a perverted one in that sense. And yeah, I see that kind of occurring now, like you said, and it is giving birth to all kinds of different demons. But the way you put it is as if humanity is one thing, and there are just these challenges that we need to face.
Yeah.
And the demon, like you said, is sacred, which is a very Zen way of thinking about it. Because I tend to catastrophize a little bit. I'm like, oh my god, no, we're doomed. Like I'm a big doomer in that sense. A big doomer. But at the same time, there is an optimism in understanding that these are just challenges, and even though they may be challenges that may take aeons to overcome, we also have it in us to kind of like push past them.
Yes.
So yeah, I really I admire your optimism in that sense of seeing it in a more big picture way rather than just catastrophizing in the moment.
Well, I do believe that humanity, like when push comes to shove and like shit gets real, we can figure out like any problem. But it takes things getting really bad before we'll do it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate that it's like we'll only get our shit together and like come together and like figure stuff out unless there's like this really big problem.
Mm,
But at the same time, I mean, isn't that how we all are in our individual lives too? I
of
mean, we
course.
just kind of like are lazy and like, I don't want to, whatever. But unless then something crazy happens, you're like, oh, I gotta
Oh
figure my
no, I
shit
gotta
out.
fix
I
it.
gotta,
Yeah.
and then you get serious and you buckle down and you like work through this issue. And so it's like we
It's
just gotta
kind of why I also feel like a lot of these big existential stories come out of Japan and are in anime because
Mhm.
it's a culture that has had to face a lot of natural disasters just
Oh
like based
yeah.
upon its like location, and they've sort of evolved an incredibly collectivist culture. Not to glamorize collectivist cultures because there's issues with collectivism just as there
Yeah.
is with individualism, but that collectivism sort of kicks into gear. There's this almost like insane sense of cooperation, almost like
Yes.
it's like ancestral trauma kicks in
Mhm.
from having to
Yes.
like face like tsunamis and plagues and earthquakes
Mhm.
and shit. Like whenever there's a
Mhm.
disaster, there's this sort of sense of cooperation that just sort of kicks in. And I feel like, yeah, a lot of these stories come out of Japan specifically because they're used to having this like mild level of existential dread like kind of underneath them constantly.
Mhm.
And yeah, I wonder what you think about in terms of Akira, Japanese culture, and the elements of Japanese culture that are like present, and the Japanese zeitgeist that are sort of present in Akira, and the sort of anxieties that it's like expressing and attempting to explore.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely dealing with being bombed with twice with the atomic bomb. I mean, like Godzilla is also an artistic expression of dealing with that horrific event or events. And this is also another one of those things where it's just like really dealing, like dealing with it and expressing it and like what it's like to have some giant bomb go off and just kill a lot of people and destroy an entire area. I mean, there's also, yes, the tsunamis, but I think this specifically is like dealing with a lot of the trauma from the nuclear bombs. And also, too, in the 60s in Japan, or the 60s and the 70s, there was like a lot of revolution going on. And there was also, too, there was like a whole biker culture, like what is it? I can't, it's like starts with a B. It's like Buzosku or Buzokus. I can't remember it. But there was like a whole biker culture that was going on where, a lot of people, like they felt this malaise. And they were like, whatever, I'm just going to be a crazy biker. Like, I'm just going to join a crazy biker gang and be wild. And they really were. And so, like, this is also like taking elements of like that really rebellious time in their culture. But like, again, bringing it forward into the future and seeing like what the end of that is. Because it's interesting because now, like, the Japanese culture has definitely mellowed out a lot more. Like there's a lot less rebellion than there was in the 60s and the 70s. There was like a real hot moment of just like there was protests, student protests, like all sorts of stuff going on over there. And yeah.
Yeah, I always find Japan is a very interesting barometer for the collective unconscious, because like a lot of interesting things happen there technologically, environmentally. It just seems to be kind of like an accelerationist kind of utopia in that sense.
Yeah.
So whenever I want to look at whatever trend is going to happen in Western culture, I always look to Japan first. And like the atomization problem that we're experiencing in the West currently happened there before it happened there. The declining birth rates as well.
Yeah.
Is also something that happened there before it happened here.
Yeah.
But one other aspect as well is like the kind of disintegration of the social fabric in a sense. And one of the things that really struck me in Akira when I was watching it as a kid even was like the anime that's infested their society in it. It's almost shocking how nihilistic and violent these kids are. And how little the social fabric is like supporting them. And like that does reflect certain trends in Japanese culture previously, like you said, in the 80s, but even now, like the hikikomori phenomenon and the cafe, manga cafe hotel situation things that they have where people are like living rough in these internet cafes, and young people sort of feel kind of cheated and left behind. They have an aging population. There's all this sort of sociological like damage and tension, and also existential terror. But then on top of it, it's like this gorgeous like sprawling Tokyo lights and manga, anime, sushi. Like, oh my gosh, Japan, how kawaii. And like that's also kind of a running theme in Japanese culture, because like the pleasure districts in the Heian period, for instance, were very much the same thing. It was this sort of commercialized, beautiful, idealized, like a lot of ukiyo-e art kind of represents that. But then under the surface of that was like this hellish like world where there are pimps and prostitutes and people dying of like syphilis and all kinds of like really bad social problems caused by like their hyper consumer culture at the time. And also because Japan was one of the first places to have a printing press, or sort of primitive printing press with the woodblock method. They had media before anywhere else in the world kind of had media, and also the ability to mass produce and mass disseminate media. So there's this like business behind it this whole time, and like it's very interesting to just watch the trends in that country and how the historical through line has like contributed to this acceleration. And
Yeah.
it's really present in Akira as well. Like,
Yeah.
you can feel like all of these weird historical influences kind of coming together to create this hellish vision of a Neo Tokyo.
Yeah. Well, I feel like they're like the canary in the coal mine because they're so monocultural. Like
Mm,
they're a first world nation, but they're monocultural. Like they really don't have a lot of other foreigners that live there. And so and they're islanders. I mean, it's an island. So
mhm.
it's like you have that islander cooperation, but on a larger scale. And it does reflect, like you were saying, it's just like Tokyo is so huge. It's way bigger and way more packed out than LA is. And it is just so efficient. It works well. And it just, for example, I got the wrong train ticket. And I went to put my little ticket in, and then it was like, meh, this is the wrong ticket. And this lady just immediately came out, looked at my ticket, took it to this guy, got me my change back, and showed me where I should get the ticket from in under a minute. And it was like, this was so, and we don't even speak the same language, and like we just figured it out like really fast. And I was just like so impressed with that. Like I just have so much respect for that. Like it was so fantastic. So I see what you mean, and I do feel the same way. As like they're like the pure canary in the coal mine, and if they start to struggle, then like that doesn't mean great things for the rest of us. And like with the declining birth rates and things like that is just like, I really worry about them. I'm just like, you guys got to start having babies because I love your culture and I want you guys to keep going forever. Like, what? Like, you're the best animators in the world. Like,
Yeah.
you guys are like so lit in so many ways. Like, we need to keep it going. But again, at the same time, like in our culture too, like things are declining. And it is because of that, like, a disintegration of civilization. It's just like people are just so like unsure of things are so up in the air. Like people don't have enough money to have kids, people don't like have enough money to have a house. It's like, how can I have children if I can't even get a house? Like I get it, I'm in the same boat, like I feel it too, where I'm just like, I would like to have a family, but I cannot support one. Like, and I just, and I don't want to be, I don't want to bring someone in if I can't take care of them,
Exactly.
properly. Like it's a big
Exactly.
responsibility to bring a life
Massively.
into this world.
We're in London, England, which is also a decaying empire, and it's very strange because I feel like Americans are getting a taste of it now. But like
yeah.
ours is like a long dead kind of empire, and the Queen dying last year was like the final nail in the coffin. And
Wow.
ever since that happened, this country's been in sort of a tailspin of an existential crisis. Like, what are we? Because it was like this idea, even in London, like one of the great things about London is that because it was the center of empire at one point, it's like such a multicultural city. Like, the other day at work, some guy was telling me about how his girlfriend is like half Turkish and half Nigerian, and I was like, that's like the most South London mix that you could ever like imagine. Like, it's just like the type of mix that you could only get in this city in that sense. And everybody's represented here. But like part of the reason I'm even here is because Nigeria was a colony of Britain, and a lot of people from the colonies were brought over here after the end of the World War. After the end of World War II, to help rebuild England, and then we stayed and built families and became English in that sense. So like there's all this like existential crisis as to what being British actually means anymore, because one time it was an empire that stretched across the world, but now it's not that anymore, and it's not even that relevant anymore in terms of like the Western world in that sense. And like people felt as if the Queen and the sort of her specific role in the royal family was the last sort of foothold we had in like the international psyche. And once that disappeared, now everyone's kind of like, oh, all we give people now is like Love Island and Harry Styles or whatever. Those are our major cultural exports.
If they hadn't of castrated J.K. Rowling publicly, we would also still have Harry Potter. But now that's kind of tinged with like,
yeah, everyone complains if you mention
I agree with
Harry
everything
Potter.
J.K. Rowling's ever said in their life. So
yeah. I didn't think about like that's something as an American, like presidents, whatever, they're out every 4 to 8 years, or whatever. So it's like I forget about like
our
what
weird feudal ways over here.
yeah, like yeah, my ancestors got out of the UK. They were
Yeah.
like, we gotta go. We
Yeah.
hate these banks and these religions. I gotta get out of here, And so I forget about like what a huge impact that has. It's so funny. My friend just was over there and she brought me back a big golden chocolate coin for King Charles's coronation. And she's like, I know it's dumb. I'm like, you just gave me a giant pentacle. Like this is awesome because like in the tarot deck that I worked on with my friend Alan, like I'm the Ace of Pentacles in one of those. So it's like you just gave the Ace of Pentacles a giant pentacle. Like you're gonna get such good karma. And then it was funny later that day she found out. She's like, oh, I still have my job. Thanks. You're such a witch. And I was like, well, you gave me a giant pentacle.
So
oh my gosh, no problem.
Well, if it means that much to you, Danika, I can like go and buy you some from the toy shop so I can get all the good karma. Send me your address.
It was such a random thing. Like it was just so weird. I was just like, oh shit.
Wow.
But it's like it's interesting how in especially in like London, you guys have like, okay, there's the royal family and it's like you'll never be a royal. It doesn't matter what you do. Like, you're in your area and that's it. You're in your little, I mean, it's not a caste system like as bad as India. India is very like rigid with their social levels. But like there is that whole thing in England where it's like, okay, well, you're down here. And then there's these people who are like up here.
Yeah.
And in America, there's like the American dream and like, oh, anyone can be president, which isn't true. I don't think like, I don't believe that that's true. I feel like you still have to be a part of an elite situation to
Still
be
need
like
your father to give you a small loan of $1 million.
I mean, you need lots of things,
You need a lot of things. No, our class system is a lot more like forward facing, but like that's even the case outside of the Western world. Like even in Nigeria, like my country of origin, like fuck, it's you see how it's brutal. I took Jake back last year or was it 2 years ago?
2 years ago
for my brother's wedding, and it was the first time he came to Africa as like a Westerner or whatever. And because my family's like comfortably middle class in the Nigerian sense, and everybody who's in that class has servants usually, because obviously there's no welfare system. So people who are poorer, if they're in the cities and they're not like running a business or whatever, they tend to work in the houses of people who are better off. And if you see the way people treat their staff in Africa, it's like it's like Dickensian, worse than Dickensian, and it's obviously a shock to the system as a Westerner. And that's the thing. It's like I want to.
In hell,
literally. It's like a Charles Dickens novel in like Apocalypse Now situation, basically. And like you're seeing this poor like servant being mistreated, and you're like, holy shit, what is going on? But it's like a lot of woke Westerners would struggle to digest that because they sort of have this romanticized view of class and human nature and how the world works. And like even for myself, even though I tend to view myself as like somewhat grounded and realistic, it was a fucking shock for me to see my brother slap a driver across the face. Like
it's like that. Wow.
Yeah, it's common. It's fucking common. Ask any like weird third world like third culture kid who's like an immigrant abroad, what their experiences are like when they go home. You see things like that all the time as like commonplace and like and normalized. It's like entrenched into every society, no matter where you are. Some cultures are a bit more honest and brutal about it than others. And I think there's this weird cognitive dissonance in America where you're like, we're all cowboys and we like got rid of the king and like we're all equal. And it's like, no, you guys have a fucking rigid ass like Mayflower wasp aristocracy like situation going on as well. Like,
well, that's the thing. Like the American dream is like it's an illusion. It's a dream. It's not real. Like, and so people are like constantly kind of being controlled by this illusion, this promise of this thing that is like, I mean, not to say that you can't better yourself here and you can't like rise in your station, like again, like in a place like India, from what I understand, if you're in a certain caste system, like you're there. That's your
Mhm.
thing. Like there's no
Mhm.
rising above it. You have to die and be reborn somewhere else,
Yeah, or unless Danny Boyle decides to make a movie about your
Yes,
life.
yes. I mean,
Slumdog Millionaire style.
there is opportunity to like raise yourself up in your status, but I mean, again, it's like it's so small and most people don't end up doing that. And it's
Mm.
just like, and they're just controlled by, again, this illusion, this idea of this American dream. And that in itself can be very detrimental and it's very manipulative. It has its
Definitely.
dark side, but it also has, its positive sides too, where like some people get like, yeah, I'm going to go over there, I'm going to make it happen. And then they do,
Yeah,
like, I
yeah.
mean, I've had people, like, I know people who came here and like have done really well for themselves.
Yeah, big
So,
time, big time.
yeah.
It's like one of those kind of lucky dip situations in America where it's like you could get really lucky and like make it. And like
Mhm.
I feel like that dream is like what keeps the wheels turning in a way
Yeah.
because it is possible. It's not like it's
Yeah.
not. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't try either if you're in a situation where you're blessed to have those opportunities. Like people still die to get to America or even just to the Western world in general to have opportunities that people take for granted here.
Oh, yeah.
Like massively.
Yeah.
And yeah, I think that part of one of the things that's sort of looming in the zeitgeist currently, unfortunately, is war.
Oh, yeah.
Another symptom of the collective unconscious, like in
Mhm.
chaos and in trouble. But usually during times like this, we're forcibly exposed to viewing other parts of the world and like other cultures and other
Yeah.
perspectives, even though
Mhm.
currently our countries are trying to insulate us from different perspectives. Like I thought it was pretty bad that like RT was banned in like all major Western countries as soon as like the war broke out. It's
Yeah,
like
yeah.
we should be able to get, even if you think it's bad and it's misinformation, like you should be able to trust people to like, use their cognitive faculties to parse through truth and untruth.
Yes.
And it seems as if we're sort of slowly being isolated more and more from outside perspectives and are becoming like more solipsistic. And one of
Yeah.
the ways that like that has been challenged previously has been through art. And I am kind of seeing a renaissance happening creatively outside of the West.
Mhm.
Currently, a lot of
Mhm.
the shows and movies and stuff that have grabbed me within the within the couple of years of things that have come out of the West, specifically like South Korea, they've
Mhm.
been having a little bit of a
Oh,
movie
yeah.
cinematic like thing going.
Yeah.
I'm like, what's going on there? I wonder what you think. Is there anything outside of the West that you think is interesting currently, or that is inspiring you, or that's giving you life? The
What
Wailing was my awakening. I love that movie so much. It's so fucking good.
The Wailing is great. It
Yeah.
is great. I saw that in the theater, and I was, like, not aware of how long it was when I sat down, but it was fantastic. I was like, "What is this?" I mean, I obviously, like I mean, I've just joined a Shaolin Temple, so I'm very interested in Eastern ideas and Eastern artwork as well. Like, I mean, I watch so much anime. I mean, I'm not even gonna lie to you. Like, I watch Crunchyroll, like, almost every day I'm on there watching some show. I just finished Flying Witch, which is just a really nice, cozy anime about this witch girl who's like living in the country and like hanging out with her family. Like, it's just so
That sounds
nice.
so nice.
I
You need to
well,
recommend me some because every time I try to find anime, I always run into something hideously perverted.
oh yeah,
There
there's a
was
lot of
one.
that, but
Yeah, there was one I tried to watch where the guy was like an open Heba file that was like thirsting after this like 16-year-old like
idol,
idol. And then
he
the
died
second
and like came back to life
as her baby.
baby.
And I was like, what the fuck? And it was
But
like the
still remembered like being an adult and like lusting after her
it
as
was
a
just
baby.
so
weird.
and
And
there
it
was
was like, yeah, over the line, man.
there was
Over the
another
line.
one where there was like a goblin rape in the first like
It was, like,
5
Demon
minutes.
Slayer
And it's
or
like, look,
something.
I like
Yeah.
weird shit, but like, ease me into like what is the sort of easy route into anime that isn't
Yeah.
gonna like traumatize my like brain.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, that's a great thing about anime is that there's everything, I mean, there's any type of genre you want to watch. If you want to see something that's more action filled or more gory or scary or funny or slice of life or romance, like they've got you. They have everything you could ever want and more. I personally like, I have a moon in Pisces, so I'm a little romantic. And I have a romantic side, and I like to read like romance webtoons, and I like to watch romance animes. And there's this one that I really love because a lot of them take place in high school, and that's fine. I'll read a high school romance, but I am in my 30s. So like I don't really, it's nice to find romances about older people. And I found one it's called The Ice Guy and His Cool Female Colleague. And it's like this office romance between these people in their either 20s or 30s or something like that. But they're a little bit older. And like, but the guy is like descended from a snow woman. So he has like snow powers. Like not everybody in this world is like descended from some Japanese mythological being, but some people are. And so when he gets like really flustered, he like a blizzard will happen, or like little cute snowmen pop out if he's really happy. And
That's
then like
awesome.
but he like can't control it, so if he gets like too excited, like it's a problem. And because he's falling in love with his colleague who's just a normal, lady. Like it's funny to see him like literally freeze up if he's nervous to like ask her about something or whatever. And like that is like really cute, and I like it a lot, and it makes my happy day. And I just like to watch it when I'm eating my lunch, and like it really just helps me get through things because it's so funny. Like, okay, I love my little sister. She's always asking me to watch these crazy HBO shows. And I watched Succession. I watched all of Succession and I liked it. It's a great show. I'm not saying I don't like it. I'm not saying it's not a great show, but it is so stressful.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
I tuned out after season 1. I couldn't do anymore. But he was into it, and he was like, Logan Roy, yeah, like
yeah. I mean, fantastic characters, really great character arcs, like very, like it was I enjoyed it, and I had a good time, but at the same time it is very stressful.
Yeah.
And it's nice to just like have shows that I can watch in my life that are like that help me unwind and like are not stressful, like Flying Witch. Like Ice Guy.
I found it demoralizing in a way because it's like seeing all those like hideous power dynamics is fine when it's like in medieval costume. Like give me dragons and like make it a little bit more abstracted away from my reality and I can take it. But then like Succession was just like too visceral and too real. It was like it was like based on the Murdoch family. And it's just like, Jesus, this is like, but it's not that it's amazing writing, great acting, everything. Same thing with like White Lotus and shows like that. Like really well done, great scripts, but it's just like it hits too deeply on like modern pathology and like kind of wallows in it, and it's just like that's okay it's like in small doses, like that's like most people's daily lives is dealing with assholes like that. So it's like
it's like I have enough stress in my life as it is, bro. Oh, this is killing me,
like, anime seems to be the thing though right now, and it's taking over a lot of markets. Like even we went to our what's the bookshop that we have that's like Barnes and Noble, Waterstones. We went to Waterstones the other day, and they used to have a big comic book section. Like you could go there, you could get your Alan Moore, you get whatever the fuck you wanted. But now the comic book section is like this big, and the fucking manga section is like huge, this fucking big.
Huge.
And it's the same thing. Anime is all over the streaming platforms now. There seems to be this sort of incursion of this like format into everything, and it seems to be pushing out everything else. What do you think of this phenomenon? What are your thoughts?
That is a really great question because I mean I've been reading mangas and watching anime like since I was a kid, but when it was like hard to get your hands on it, like it was not easy. And like I remember getting an eBay account back in the day just so I could get like VHS fan subs where some fan subtitled it, you know what I'm saying? And it's just like, that's how it used to be to get your hands on it. But now it's like, so the access is so easy. Like I said, Crunchyroll, it's just like, what? I can just find stuff on here and there's like hundreds of titles to choose from. Like, this is so fantastic. But I think that like, I don't know, kids are loving it, man. They're hopping on the manga and I'm just like very pleased. And I know we were talking about how people don't read, but there are kids who are reading mangas and like reading is reading, and it's just like you need reading to be enjoyable, and I'm so glad that they're hopping onto it. And I think it's kind of stemming from video game culture potentially. Like I feel like a lot of video game stuff comes out of Japan, not everything obviously, but I think that these kids are like already kind of like, oh, I'm playing these games, and then they see these like mangas, and I don't know, I'm just glad that they're here, you know, like, 'cause
Yeah.
even though American comics are definitely on the downslide, like they're,
What's going on?
I don't know how much
What's
longer they're
happening?
gonna, I don't know how much longer they're gonna be able to like keep making these things. But like manga is just popping off, and it's just, I think it's too, because like there's just such a wealth of different types of storytelling, like I was just talking about. I mean, there's just something for everybody, and there's just like, and again, here's another thing that I think people respond to with mangas is that, generally speaking, and this isn't all of them, but generally speaking, you have an artist and who's also the writer. Like there's just a creator, and they draw it and they write it, and they'll have assistants that help them, but really it's their vision. And so a lot of these things, these stories are coming from like one person. And so they're very pure. And it's not like it is over here where you've got, okay, I've got the writer, I've got the artist, I've got the inker, I've got the colorist, and then I've got the editor, and then I have, you know, Marvel, who is owned by Disney, and then I got Disney breathing down my neck about certain stuff because they're making these movies. So then we can't put this in our comic, and we have to do that. You know, it's like there's just so much politics that go into these things that water it down and they make it bad. Whereas mangas, it's just like, hey, this guy really had this cute idea for this Demon Slayer comic, and like this guy who travels around with his sister in a box, and she's a demon and he's a demon slayer, and they're kicking demons' asses together, and it's just like, yes, hell yeah, you know, like
uncomplicated.
Yeah. But it goes back to the whole kind of woodblock printing tradition in Japan. Like if you look at like ukiyo-e art, you see a lot of the motifs in manga, in anime, in that sort of tradition. And also because it was mass produced and like widely distributed, there's always been this culture of like telling stories through these dynamic, attention grabby visual imagery in a way that's like fast and that connects with very specific audiences. And a lot of really interesting, wonderful things come out of that. But then there's also this kind of mass-minded consumer kind of element to it that I find somewhat icky. The fact that it can be very specific in terms of its in terms of what it's catering to. Like you said, there's something for everybody's kind of specific, like niche inclinations in it, in that sense. And I feel like the culture is kind of gearing more towards that, which is probably why it's becoming more popular. Everyone has their aesthetic and their particular like fetish or their particular interest or this or that. So it's like very particular in that sense. And I kind of miss there being these sorts of cultural hearths that we can gather around. I remember once you talking about how when Game of Thrones came out, it made you feel like you were part of humanity for like the first time. I felt the same feeling. Same thing with like things like Lord of the Rings, like back in the days where there were these like, you know, big things that like a lot of heart and soul was put into, again, that were, you know, these epic stories that everyone could relate to. That kind of showcase something interesting about the human experience, that kind of grabs the cultural zeitgeist by the balls. I miss that a little bit. I miss that kind of shared transpersonal experience around a cultural artifact, rather than it being, oh, this is my niche like anime interest, and this is your niche interest, and that's my niche interest. I wonder what you think about the kind of nicheification that comes along with this form of art.
I mean, I think it's very beautiful. Like I love the diversity of just like you can get your hands on everything, but there's also still those things that hit that like everybody loves within anime. Like not everybody, but you know, like Chainsaw Man. Like it's like, this is so good. Like it's like, wow. And then I felt that way too when like Chainsaw Man was coming out on Crunchyroll, and they were just like parsing it out like once a week, and I was just like, oh, I'm so excited to be back in like in something that other people are watching, and we're all watching it, we're all really excited about it. And I ended up going to the library and requesting like all the different mangas for Chainsaw Man, and I ended up like reading all the manga series, and that's come out so far. And so there are still those things, you know, that are like huge that you can share. But even then, like you were saying, it is small. It is a smaller bubble. Like, I mean, most people don't, you know, in the world, when you just go out in the world, most people don't know what Chainsaw Man is, you know? So, I mean, it is definitely within like the weeb community that it's huge. So it's like, so it's not like huge, but But I do like, and that was one thing about Succession that I did enjoy, is like a lot of people were watching that, and it was something that I could connect with my sister and my brother-in-law on, because it's like they live a very different life than I do, and we don't always have like a lot of commonalities. And so it was nice to have something that like I could talk to with them about, and we can make jokes about. And now I can send them memes if I see, a Kendall Roy meme or something. It's like, oh, haha, So I was really watching that more for like to connect with my sister, but it's also big, in the culture as well. So it was nice to be a part of something again.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Is there really one last question for the evening, because I could keep you here forever and we could
Yes.
talk forever.
No, it's been wonderful.
It's been awesome. Well, I wanted to ask what you think about what's going on with Western comics currently. Is there hope? Because as much as it's been really interesting to see this sort of Japan invasion, I really do want there to be another Alan Moore someday, or like another Grant Morrison, or another Mobius, another, like, I really do love the Western canon in that sense. I do love Western superheroes, despite the fact that they've been like bastardized and deformed, and they've sort of taken demonic form in these like Marvel monstrosities. I do love what they symbolize and what they represent about the collective psyche of the West. And I think that they're very important sort of tools in that sense.
Yes.
Yeah, I wonder, is there hope? And what is going on? What happened? There seemed to have been a renaissance as well. Like, I got really into Image Comics, and when you were making your videos about like the Wicked and the Divine and all of that stuff, and Saga, and there was this like explosion, and then it just kind of fizzled out, and I'm like, what the fuck? Like, we went to the comic book shop the other day, and I was like, hey, where's the new issue? And he was like, nobody knows where it is. No one knows what's going on. What's happening? Why did it all go away?
Right. Well, I mean, that's what I'm talking about in society in general, like things that just should be there or should be working or just not. And you're like, like we're in like I call like before COVID, like the before times, it's like those were the before times. And now like we have turned a really weird corner, and everything is just seemingly in like various states of disarray. And it's odd to experience, and it can be really frustrating on so many levels. But with Western comics, like, there was this huge burst of creativity when you had like Marvel was relaunching itself, and you had like I think it was like Marvel Now or something, and then you had like the New 52, and then you had Image Comics was just like fucking pumping out bangers. Like I don't know what was in the water, but something was just like going off. I don't know where it came from, but it was like great. It was a wonderful wave to ride. But the wave definitely, like, I feel like has ended, and especially with Marvel being bought by Disney and DC being bought by Warner Brothers. I mean, that in particular, I mean, Image is still its own thing, but those two happenings really changed. Like, it just changed everything. And I was like, this is the beginning of the end. Like, this is like, and the thing is like these companies, like this is just a subsidiary of them. And yes, they're using, these writers, and they're making these comics to keep these IP alive while they're making these movies. But once, these comic book movies aren't a thing anymore and nobody cares, and they stop doing it, because, I mean, there'll still be some things here and there, but like, that's also receding. The wave of superhero movies is also kind of like people are fatigued by it. People are kind of over it. And so it's like, well, they don't have to keep those imprints going. Like, they could just shut the shop and be like, okay, we're done. No more Superman, no more Batman, no more whatever. I don't think they may just like keep it going like online or something. I do feel like in my lifetime, they're going to stop selling single issues. Like I don't know. I just feel like that's coming. Like, I'm just like, I've been waiting for it for a while, where I'm just like, when are they going to just stop selling? Because right now too, I mean, with things like webtoons, I can go online and I can read these webtoons for free. And if I want to spend money and get coins and like do fast passes, I can do stuff like that. But like, it's easy, it's simple, it's on my phone. I love it. I'm like I can't believe that I'm such a big fan of webtoon. But then you go to the comic book store and it's like, okay, I have to wait a month, and then it's like $5-6 or more. And then a lot of times, like, it's not very good. Like, a lot with the political stuff going on with DC and Marvel, it's just like really has impacted the storytelling a lot.
I wanted to ask about that as well, because I know it's
Yeah.
a conversation that like is annoying and that people have all the time and blah 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 blah. But the wokeification aspect of things, like
Mhm.
the way that kind of identity politics
Mm.
invaded things and took precedent over real storytelling, it's a problem
Mhm.
that you see generally in everything currently.
Yeah, there's this, it's so odd to me that people are so into preaching, like, you know, like their agendas, whatever that is. And it's like, I grew up in the South, and I, you know, grew up in a very conservative town, and like I remember being preached to by people, and da 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 da, you have to believe this, or you're going to hell. You have to think this, or you have to look like that, or you can't do this thing. You know, whatever. You have these people just telling you all this stuff that you're supposed to think and do and say. And I was just like, ugh, you know, like, no, thank you. And then now there's been like this really weird reversal where now it's like the other side is doing the exact same thing, you know, and it's just like nobody likes being preached to. And you can put your ideas, I mean, comics, like writers have always been putting subversive ideas and things like that and their own stuff into their comics. Like that's what you do with art, you know,
Of
like that's a
course.
part of it.
Of course.
But when it becomes ham-fisted and it's just like, again, I just feel like I'm being preached to and I'm being yelled at, you know, then it's like, ugh, like this is like, no, thank you. Like it's the same feeling I get from when I was growing up. It's just like, I'm okay. Like I don't need you to tell me how to think and feel and what to say and what to do. Like,
I mean, some of my favorite, you know, comics are, you know, have elements of the author's political philosophy, like Alan Moore, for instance.
like
V
Vendetta is about anarchism, which is the most prime candidate from the most cringe fucking shit ever. Yeah, he manages to make that one of the most compelling, serious comics,
coolest,
you could ever read,
you know,
so.
like, you know, like he's like Alan Moore's, like, you know, he has a very strong and overt political philosophy. And he doesn't shy away from it, but at the same time, he's a fucking storyteller. And that's like what he's like doing. That's like what takes precedent over it, and the truth of like the human experience. It's not all about like him trying to like push a certain agenda, but we even
he's not trying to convince you of anarchism.
Yeah, he's not trying to make you an anarchist,
but he's telling the story of V Vendetta, and it so happens that the main character is an anarchist.
Exactly. You even saw a clip of were they like writers or like executives or something at, was it Marvel or?
Oh yeah, that was horrifying.
Was it Marvel?
It was DC.
It was DC. Yeah, they
were
a
DC writers roundtable.
It was the most
COVID,
demonic thing I've ever seen.
Like basically, the destruction of comics and like storytelling and everything that we're just discussing.
Well, no, they were discussing their agenda for what they wanted to put in the comics, and nothing they were talking about.
And we've only just begun. It's like, oh my!
They literally were discussing their agenda, and nothing about story. Everything was about the gender identity and sexuality and racial signifiers of the characters and how it was going to bring in this demographic. And that
dude, that's, oh my god, I hate that pie chart crap where it's just like, evil. Oh, we gotta bring in this demographic. It's just like, just make a good story, bro. Like, and you know, here's like, you know, I love the X-Men. The X-Men obviously is talking about, you know, it's got a real theme of like, hey, like, these are the outsiders. They're not bad people. People fear and hate them. You know, it's like got this whole theme against xenophobia. You know, it's like, hey, these are the mutants, but it's like they're actually really cool people. Not all of them. Some of them are villainous, whatever. But you know, it's just like, hey, like they're not all bad. And but at the same time, it's like, okay, so you have this, you know, agenda, kind of not agenda, but I mean, it's just like this theme against xenophobia. But at the same time, you have these really great characters who have these really complicated interpersonal relationships. And it's just so like you just fall in love with them so much. And they're all so different. And they just all have these interesting like personal problems. And I mean, I just the soap opera drama of it all, like just like sucks me in, you know, like that's what I need, you know, and I love the messaging, like I love all that, but like they don't make it a point like that's what this story is about. It's like you really fall in love with the characters.
The big question or the big question, but like the big good and evil in X-Men, exactly as you said, is like it's broader xenophobia, but the villain then is like their whole principle is essentially eugenics, and that we are like superior genetically, and then like taking it the other way. So it like fully explores that
the breadth
idea.
and depth of all of
Like,
these different
doesn't just go bad thing bad ideology to come and be super amazing and come and fix and solve the day. It's like no, this is two sides of a coin, and this is where it goes when you fucking go down this rabbit hole. It's like dangerous, you know?
Exactly. And even beyond like X-Men and you know, all of these like, you know, franchises that we love and have loved for a really long time, you know, it's affecting the art that minorities are making too, which also upsets me. You know, there's this sort of, in the desperation to get one's foot through the door, it's almost like it's easier to kind of kowtow to those like expectations and kind of pander to them that it is to focus on creating stories that resonate with the human condition. It's almost as if the identity comes first.
Yes.
Instead of and I think what a lot of people don't realize is what makes people come, what makes things stick. Like if you really want to have an impact on the collective unconscious, tell a good fucking story. What you look like, who you fuck, none of it fucking matters. Just tell a good fucking story and people will come, because we're all human at the end of the day. And it's the universality of the human experience that like draws us to stories in the first place. And I really hate seeing, especially in America, because like even though African Americans have had a difficult time of it historically, they're still a privilege in the sense that they're Americans, and like they are the hegemonic image of like blackness globally, basically. And the fact of the matter is, like, when they use the privilege of their proximity to Americanness to tell dog shit stories, it affects all of us, unfortunately.
You just got to stand up like Egypt did, mate.
Like, Egypt was like, no, fuck you, we're gonna sue you, Jada Pinkett Smith. But even then, it is kind of like an issue I noticed, not just even with like LGBT blah 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 blah, like all of that stuff. It seems like if anybody has any kind of identity signifier in front of them, they think that it's about being idiosyncratic rather than trying to explore the universals within things that are idiosyncratic, basically.
People are so want to be in these little boxes. Like it's odd to me how people really want to like package themselves in these little boxes and like, I'm this, I'm that, blah blah blah. It's like, you know what, I'm a human, you know, like, and I change and I grow, and there's, you know, and I have all these different experiences.
I know why. I know why they do that. Because they got to fit the algorithm, right?
Yeah.
They got to fit the algorithm to be put into a genre of person, so that you then get recommended to those other people in the genre of person that you are.
Oh, it's so demonic.
So that you have a moniker of hope of being noticed in amongst the ocean of people and content creators or whoever the fuck on the internet. So this is like the driving force of like,
it's conformity. It's creating like a kind of weird conformity in a way.
And it's a lot of narcissism, you know. It's like I can't see myself in another character unless they look like me or fuck like me or come from the same continent as me or whatever, you know. It's just like when I was watching Ghostbusters, like I was like, yeah, I could be a Ghostbuster. I didn't need to see a female Ghostbuster to know that I could be a Ghostbuster. Like, it was fine, you know, like I was, and I related to all of them. Like, I relate to all of them on different levels, you know. So
even being a black nerd, I mean, it's not as if it's not nice sometimes to see yourself represented, whatever. But it didn't mean I couldn't relate to Daria or like Velma or any of the other characters who I kind of like projected upon in my teen years, because I'm a human, she's a girl, her mom's a lawyer, my mom's a lawyer, she thinks humanity's like dumb and I think humanity's dumb sometimes. It's like you can find that sense of resonance with anything. And I mean, it's not as if like there aren't psychological benefits to representation or whatever, but like I want good representation.
Right. If it's representation for the sake of representation versus like representation because somebody has a great idea for a character and they really have this thing inside them that they need to express.
They need to express, exactly. And I want to see
Bridgerton.
Oh God. Oh no. Oh dear. But that's what I'm saying is if you're if in terms of like, I guess, creating more compelling images of people who aren't represented, it's like if you really want to win the cultural unconscious over or win people over, you have to tell good stories. You have to give them something compelling. You have to give them something they can relate to. But it seems as if, again, it's almost like I don't want to be related to, because my distinctness is what makes me like special and above others. There is an element of narcissism to it, like you were saying.
Well, and that's like, I think that's the dark side of the Age of Aquarius. It's like that's the dark side of individualism, where it turns to narcissism, and it's like, oh, I am valued because I'm different because of this, and that makes me this, and then I can. Anytime you're like looking down on other people because you're this way, it's just like, but isn't that what you're fighting against? Like, isn't that what you guys don't like? Is like people looking down on you because you're a certain way, but then now you look down on people because it's just like this. Again, there's like a Frank Herbert quote. It's like this barbarous form of incest, where it's just like, like, please, like, can we break the cycle, which, by the way, let me just put a plug out there. This is coming in September, but I've worked with Akira the Dawn on a full-length Dune Wave album, and I just got to listen to it for the first time this week, and I'm so hype on it. And I've got to create like 5 album artworks pretty soon, and then record all these like music videos and stuff like really quickly. But it's like, if anyone ever was like, hey, how do you identify spiritually, politically, philosophically, I would just be like, just listen to Dune Wave, Odyssey, just listen to this album. Like everything, because like I went through 6 books and I took my favorite quotes, which there's so many, and I arranged them into songs. So I found like all my quotes about like government, or all my quotes about law, or my quotes about the mystery of life, and like how to do life, like, and I put them all together and arranged them in a little song, and then I spoke them, and then my friend Akira put music behind it. And there's like specifically like there's 2 songs, like The Violence of Our Ancestors is one, where it's like, we pay for the violence of our ancestors, there is no escape, and it's just like talking about this. It's like, like I just see it, like, just anytime you do something shitty, it's going to come back to you, it's just like, and then like the oppressors learn from the oppressed learn from the oppressors, and then.
But then there's also the notion that like none of us have our hands clean either. And like being this weird cultural mutt that I am, I kind of had to forcibly come to the realization of that. What do you do when you go back to your home country and the police brutality is 10 billion times worse than anything that could ever happen in the West? Like, no one has their hands clean. And I feel like even those whose egos sort of identify with their oppression could benefit from like having their egos detached from that, and to have a more kind of broad human perspective on things. Same thing with people who carry this sort of pathological guilt for, what they believe that their ancestors were responsible for, and things like that. Like, I feel like it's a lot of ego attachment.
They haven't got anything going on in their life.
All right, Jake.
On, like,
but I feel like it's because their egos are
from hundreds of or even thousands of years ago might have,
but also
like, done at some
also
point.
In The Ugliness Beauty Gets Born, and that's kind of why I'm so enamored with the city of London, despite the colonial history. If you look at it now and what it's given birth to, it's the reason we're together. It's the reason that you can go across the street and meet someone who's half Nigerian, half Turkish. Like,
isn't that cool?
Yeah, it's fucking. It's just like it is that kind of like the piece after the tower moment, like you were saying. And like, there's no birth of consciousness without pain, unfortunately. And when humanity encounter other humanity, unfortunately, fucked up shit goes down. But out of that comes a birth of consciousness, a birth of conscientiousness. Consciousness and conscientiousness come hand in hand. Like, it's like in the Garden of Eden, the first thing they felt was like guilt, shame, because they had transgressed against something. And I think that's the kind of situation we're going through right now, is where we're realizing the ways in which we've transgressed against ourselves and each other. And it's giving birth to a new form of consciousness. And consciousness is an amazing thing, but pain usually is the thing that leads you there, unfortunately. But that doesn't mean you should resent the pain. Like you said, the demon is sacred, which is something that I think that was very profound. I have to remind myself of that. But the struggle, the pain is sacred. It is.
And I mean, there's nothing you can do about the past. There's no way to rectify it. All you can do in the present is better.
Exactly.
Like, and just be better and try to break that cycle, and don't do the same thing. Something that happened to you, don't perpetrate that on somebody else. And
Exactly.
that's it, you know.
Exactly.
Mhm.
Okay, we could keep you here literally all evening. This has been like a fascinating conversation. I hope you'll come back again.
Yes,
is
yes,
like
this was so fun.
Thank you so much. Any more? Do all the plugs. Tell everybody everything about everything.
Yes. So you can catch me on YouTube. My YouTube channel is ComicBookGirl19. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at Danika XIX. You can hit me up on Patreon at patreon.com/DanikaXIX. You can find me till June 30th, a little bit before, on Kickstarter, kickstarter.com/projects/Akira the doc/Akira-the-documentary. It's really great. They really give you really cool URLs there that are super easy to tell people about.
We'll put
And
all the links in the description. Don't
yes,
worry.
and you can find me on Twitch, also twitch.tv/DanikaXIX. On Saturdays, I do Mystery Danika Theater, where we watch a movie together and hang out and have a good time. We've been doing raffles every week now for like stuff that I don't need in my house, where I'm like, I have so much good stuff. I don't need all this stuff. Like, I need to get rid of it. So we've been like raffling. I raffled off a really cool like Frank Frazetta Death Dealer t-shirt yesterday, or not yesterday, but on Saturday for when we watched Conan the Barbarian. So so you can come hang out, watch movies with me on Saturdays on Twitch, or any of those other things that I mentioned.
Amazing. Thank you so much. And yes, please do go and support Danika's documentary. We need more people who are passionate about the subject matter creating documentaries. I'm tired of seeing content documentaries
yeah,
and
yeah.
like serial killer fucking bullshit and like
Yeah.
all the fucking crap that people are mining for content currently. Like
Yes.
vampires and vultures sucking dry the marrow of like tragedy or whatever.
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, Akira the documentary is just, it's a real celebration of a movie that just had such a huge cultural impact. It brought anime to the West. I mean, it influenced James Cameron. I mean, it influenced like and continues to influence generations of artists. And it's just such a special film, and I believe that it's the greatest hand-drawn movie ever created, and we'll never see anything like it again. And I'm so excited to learn more about it through making this documentary and to break it down for you guys as to what makes this movie and this manga so entirely unique and special.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Danika. You were a great first
Thank
guest.
you.
And we hope you'll come back again.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Amazing.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Yes.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Have a good one.
Digital citizens fucking everywhere. Really, it's just you.
Yeah.